And let me get them on the phone right now.
We're going to get started. I understand that the state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, city council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instruction for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Enquirer, and Legal Intelligencer. You can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come, and Mr. Stitt, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Mr. Stitt, please proceed.
Councilwoman Bass.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Great.
Councilwoman Brooks.
Good morning. I am here.
Councilman Dom.
Morning, Matt, Council President, and colleagues.
Morning. Councilwoman Gauthier.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. Happy to be here.
Morning.
Morning. Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning. Happy Wednesday, Matt. Good morning, Council President and colleagues.
Morning.
Councilman Green.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. Welcome to another day of budget hearings.
Absolutely.
Councilman Heenan.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues.
Matt, I believe you skipped myself.
Sorry, Councilwoman Ginn. You are
Thank
correct,
you, Matt.
Councilman.
Good
Sorry
morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues.
Morning.
Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones.
Good morning, President, colleagues, and members of the school board. We look forward to the hearings today.
Councilman O.
Good morning, Matt. Good morning, Council President, colleagues.
Good morning, everyone.
Councilman O'Neill.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Councilwoman Parker.
President Matt, good morning, Council President and colleagues. And just wanted to note for the record, Councilman Johnson is not present because he had death in the family.
Thank you. Councilwoman McKeown Sanchez.
Good morning. Good morning. I look forward to today's very important discussion. Thank you.
Councilman Scola.
Good morning, Matt, Council President, and colleagues.
Good morning. Councilman Thomas.
Good morning, Matt. Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. And thoughts and prayers go out to the Johnson family.
Absolutely.
And Council President Clark.
Absolutely. I'm here. Okay, we clearly have established the forum, so we will proceed. But before we dive into what I'm sure will be a very informative session, I'd like to say a few words about today's process. The coronavirus pandemic has changed the world, and that includes this council. We're not in the same room, obviously, and to be honest, I really miss you guys. I look forward to a day when we can be in the same room and in that building, that wonderful, wonderful building called City Hall. But we have a job to do, and the technology that our IT team has installed will let us do it in a way that allows the public to watch and participate. This new environment comes with some new limits, however, which I want to emphasize to you. Our budget schedule is very, very tight and compressed, so we're asking the individuals, council members that ask questions, and the respondents, if you can make both your questions and your responses to the point, so we can get everyone in. This challenge for us in this particular time is also magnified by the fact that the mayor's daily press conference is at 1 o'clock. So as a result of that, Channel 64 will pull its feed from the council session. Under the Sunshine Law, we must be able to be viewed by the public when we have these remote sessions. So 12:30, we will get yanked, and so I'm asking individuals to get to your point as it relates to your question, and individuals from school district, please respond in kind. So let's get started. What I'm going to do, start the process, and this is the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 200-285, 200-286, 200-287, 200-288, 200-289, 200-290, 200-291, 200-292, and resolution number 200-307. Mr. Stitt, would you please read the titles of the bills and the resolution?
Bill number 200-285, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2021 through 2026 inclusive. Bill number 200-286, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2021 capital budget. Bill number 200-287, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2021. Bill number 200-288, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-200 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Parking Tax by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 200-289, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1800 of the Philadelphia Code entitled School Tax Authorization by revising certain tax rates all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 200-290, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2600 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Business Income and Receipts Taxes by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 200-291, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1500 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Wage and Net Profits Tax by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 200-292, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Real Estate Taxes to eliminate the discount for early payment of real estate taxes, all under certain terms and conditions. Resolution number 200-307, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia, covering fiscal years 2021 through 2025 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2020, which is to be submitted by the mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, the authority, pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this council approved by the mayor on January 3, 1992, Bill number 1563-A, by and between the city and the authority.
Thank you, Mr. Stitt. Today, we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2021, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2021 through fiscal 2026. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. So by continuing to be in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions and comments, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this particular purpose. I want to thank you. Today, I would like to also say, in honor of the long-held tradition in budget hearings, when we have a budget hearing, the Committee of the Whole, it is also co-chaired by the Chair of Education. Councilwoman Blackwell has established that tradition many, many years ago as the Chair of Education, and I am clearly not going to break that tradition. So today, Councilwoman Maria Quiñones-Sanchez will be co-chairing this particular hearing with me today. Councilwoman, did you have an opening statement?
Thank you, Council President, and to all my colleagues and to the members of the school district family. Yes, I do want to honor the tradition established by the great Janie Blackwell and want to thank you. Before we get started and we introduce the members of the school board and Dr. Height for his testimony, I just want to thank the school district for all its willingness to work with City Council and the administration. Even prior to the pandemic, Council and under your leadership, Council President, and the school district have begun to work on the forward planning of the school district of Philadelphia. After the pandemic, that communication has continued. We have actively met every other week with school district officials to talk about the implementation of their distance learning, including the access to technology and internet connectivity, the communications, language access, and their support for families, including the food distribution, the building and facilities work, and leveraging the opportunity of schools being closed to ensure that the hazards and leads of asbestos have been removed from school buildings, and that work continues, and of course, the budget concerns. We've had meetings to discuss the new behavioral health supports in the district. We've facilitated with the chair of the Children and Youth Committee conversations with the Office of Technology and our intergovernmental discussions with our own budget office and the school district's budget office. So I want to assure folks that there has been constant communication, the school district willingness to be transparent during this process and answer every single question provided not only by members of the Education Committee, but all of Council. So I look forward to the robust conversation today. As you mentioned, Council President, even though we have limited a time, I'm sure that the content will be very important and will demonstrate everyone's commitment, including the newly appointed Board of Education members, to providing the best high-quality education under the most challenging times in our history. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Today, we will hear testimony from the School District of Philadelphia, followed by public testimony on the proposed school district matters. The public testimony will be at 3 p.m. today, and I understand we have a number of individuals that have indicated their willingness and to testify, so we will do that at that particular time. At this point, Mr. Stokes, can you please call the name of the first witness to testify?
Joyce Wilkerson, Doha Ibrahim, and Dr. Height.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Council President and members of City Council. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Joyce Wilkerson. I'm the president of the Board of Education, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging my fellow board members, Amin Akbar, Julia Danzy, Leticia Hinton, Mallory Fitz-Lopez, Lee Wong, Dr. Maria McAlton, and Dr. Angela McIver. They're not here on camera with me today, but they're following these proceedings closely, and I value their support and participation. I want to begin by thanking council members for the support in moving our confirmations efficiently. That meant a lot to the board to enable us to tackle the work that we have ahead of us. In these unprecedented times, it's urgent to remain focused on academic achievement for our students, ensuring that they receive a quality K-12 education that prepares them not only for higher education and fulfilling careers, but also breaks the cycle of poverty for individuals and families, a goal the City Council has led our city on. At this particular time, we've been focused on supporting the district through unprecedented crisis that COVID-19 has presented. We are proud of the work our school communities and district leadership have done to respond to the crisis. This is work that Dr. Height will share more this morning. We're also deeply grateful for the volunteers who've rallied to support the school community by contributing their time to distribute meals, learning packets, and Chromebooks, and by donating funds for the purchase of Chromebooks. While the challenges COVID-19 presents are great, we're resolved that we cannot let the crisis stop the progress schools across Philadelphia have been making. With your support and investments, we've made tangible changes for our students in our schools by adding over 2,500 teaching and staff positions, adding academic programs, strengthening behavioral supports for our most at-risk students, and reestablishing extracurricular activities. We've invested in our buildings by modernizing classrooms, upgrading technology for students and staff, and making much-needed repairs in our buildings and remediating environmental hazards. Our investments are paying off, as public schools across Philadelphia have been moving forward, but I know that no one here who's walked inside a school building or read the news about environmental hazards in our building would say that we've done enough, and it's absolutely critical that we not slide backward. At this time, we need your support more than ever because we're deeply concerned that the COVID crisis will lead to a fiscal future marked by structural deficits that are devastating to public education. The district has moved from a place of financial stability to a looming financial crisis that could be more severe than even what we lived through 7 years ago when the district experienced a $300 million funding cut, which led to drastic layoffs, reduced support for schools, and significant decreases in building maintenance and more. This year's 2020 graduating seniors began school on the heels of the 2008 recession and have experienced negative consequences, the financial crisis, during their entire educational career. We cannot repeat this scenario for the students coming behind them. Mayor Kinney has put forward a budget proposal that would protect our students in our schools by calling for a nominal tax increase that would provide predictable funding for our schools. Our children deserve nothing less. Board members will continue to advocate for maintaining state funding at the 2019-2020 budget levels and allowing districts to use their federal funding allocations to help alleviate the additional costs we are incurring to respond to COVID-19. But we cannot do this without your help and support. We've been asking everyone in the education community, including parents, teachers, students, families, and community members, to stand together to protect public education in Philadelphia by keeping it whole, even at this devastating time. We'll continue to advocate for state and federal funds by reaching out to Governor Wolf and state legislators and asking them to support public education in the Commonwealth and the city of Philadelphia. We also support the governor's plan to correct inequities in charter school funding, and the board is lobbying with districts across the nation to secure additional federal resources. Finally, board members are deeply appreciative of the support city council members and their critical investment in the education of Philadelphia children. We know this is an incredibly difficult time, and we appreciate your work championing the education of our children. I want to thank you and turn it over to Dr. Height.
Thank you, Madam President Wilkerson, and good morning, Council President and members of City Council. And thank you for the opportunity to come before you virtually this morning to present some testimony about our proposed FY20 budget, FY21 budget. For the purpose of today's meeting, we have proposed a budget to the Board of Education that will build on previous strategic investments that we've made as a district to strengthen our schools, specifically in the area of academic achievement, progress, school climate, and culture, and college and career readiness. This work is important, and we've made significant strides as a district over the past several years, but we know there's still much more to do. I'm going to be joined this morning by our Chief Financial Officer, Ori Monson, who's going to provide a financial update and and highlight risk that we are facing moving forward. However, this comes at a time when our situation is anything but normal. COVID-19 has created a difficult and ever-evolving budget climate. As the board president just indicated, we realize that there will be both short and long-term implications to our budget, but we want to do everything possible to ensure that those impacts do not reverse the progress we've made, nor remove the supports we've been able to restore for our students and into our schools. Since May 13th, 2020, we had to do the unthinkable, and we were forced to close all schools and educational programs, leaving over 200,000 children with no place to go during the day. This was the absolute last decision my team and I wanted to make, but having children out of school weighed heavy on their hearts and their minds, and it still does. We were concerned about their safety, their ability to access ample and healthy food sources, a lack of supervision during the day, and of course, the learning gaps that will likely occur when children are not sitting with teachers in classrooms. But the concern for each child's health became paramount, and we followed the directive of both the governor and the mayor and all of the health officials. Since school buildings have been closed, we have made sure each child had the opportunity to continue their education by distributing over 2 million age-appropriate learning guides, and then 84,000 Chromebooks, and we provided some 2.2 million meals as of last Thursday. And for the whole family, we've created hotlines for mental and behavioral health, FAQs with much needed supports to manage during these uncertain times. We kicked off a virtual family academy and now are providing more than $350 to each family through their EBT card. So during the summer, food will also be available. Many of the adjustments we were forced to make in this notable school year have come with a hefty and unexpected price tag. But we knew that our students didn't deserve for COVID-19 to rob them of their education, so we did what was needed in order to keep them on course. Every day, we continue to improve on our continuity of education plan, which I'm going to talk more about after our Chief Financial Officer walks through the financial presentation. But we have been making progress on a daily basis on our digital learning opportunities to address all of the needs of our students. But again, this comes with a significant price tag and supports from our partners. I want to thank all of you, council members, council president, and the education committee for always supporting our students and our families and staying connected, although virtually through this pandemic. One of the hardest hit populations are our graduating seniors, unfortunately, who are ending their year abruptly without the opportunity to say goodbye to their classmates and teachers. I'm happy to say that we've listened to their voices and acted upon their input to host a virtual graduation for all seniors on June 9th. Many of them will be continuing their education in a trade school, at a community college, or four-year university. They are truly resilient and remarkable young people. And today we were going to have a prime example of that, but that young person is busy doing her schoolwork, albeit virtually, at Northeast High School. She is one of our student board members, Doha Ibrahim, and I know she has submitted testimony as well. So since Doha is not available, we're going to move directly to our Chief Financial Officer, Ori Monson, and then I will return to walk us through the remaining part of the presentation. Ori?
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Height, and good morning, Council President, members of Council. I just want to briefly run through the fiscal situation. At the April 23rd School Board budget hearing, we laid out our revised 5-year budget projection based on a number of key assumptions in the post-pandemic world. We assumed real estate tax revenue estimates that were provided by the city, reductions in liquor by the drink tax revenues, use and occupancy revenues, parking authority subsidies, rideshare school income tax, as well as interest income, to reset our base revenue expectations for FY21 and the 5-year plan. We assume no change in the city grant. We assume that the governor's proposed state charter rate changes would not occur. Under the Federal CARES Act, there's a maintenance of effort requirement that the state cannot drop the funding below a certain level. So we assumed that any cut would be at that maximum amount allowed under the Federal CARES Act. We assumed about $130 million would be the district share in federal stimulus funds. Nets out to about $116 for the district because we are a pass-through for non-public schools. And the 5-year plan does not assume any new costs related to labor contracts. When we ran those numbers, the assumptions resulted in a projected $38 million gap in fiscal year 21 and a $1 billion deficit by fiscal year 25. Next, please. Since that budget hearing, we did do a presentation last Thursday for the board, for the public, revising our budget. Some changes based on additional tax information, and the primary changes related to the city's proposed revised budget that was proposed by the mayor, which includes a proposed property tax increase and slight reductions in the city grant and what we were likely to get from the parking authority, and is a net increase to the district of about $33 million. In that subsequent time, PD has also indicated it would not seek a waiver of the maintenance of effort provisions, so we know that their contribution will not be lower than what's in the 5-year plan. In addition, yesterday, the governor approved the purchase of mixed drinks with takeout food, which does qualify under liquor by the drink revenues, so we're hopeful that will help the liquor by the drink revenues for the district. And based on the continuing changes in the federal budget, remove the reserve for federal cuts in the out years, and the district has continued its efforts internally to identify up to 10% cuts across central offices with an attempt to minimize impact on schools and students. Potential identified cuts, and this is still a work in progress, have already exceeded $18 million. Next, please. So the 5-year plan, and I apologize for the small numbers, with this proposed city budget and tax plan, as well as those changes we've made, but not assuming any of those cuts, we would have a $16 million positive fund balance for 21, and we would still have a $200 million on average structural deficit, and about a little over $800 million deficit by the end of fiscal year 25. Next. So as I mentioned, projecting a positive fund balance of 16.7 million, which is about 0.5% of total expenditures. So we have minimal resources to address unexpected costs and revenue shortfalls. And obviously we're in a period of great uncertainty. I mentioned the structural imbalance already. Should the city fail to pass the proposed property tax increase or state funding fall below estimates, we would have a deficit in 21. And as I said before, the plan assumes no costs associated with new labor contracts. Next, please. Just our timeline, and we are in the situation of having to act before the city or state would. So after this budget hearing today with City Council, the Board of Education is scheduled to consider the school district budget for action on the 28th. Maybe a little optimistic for the city to complete adoption of tax measures for the school district, and hopefully getting a state budget in June. And then obviously based on all that, we would know if we continue to have a gap and what we might need to, we'll continue to prepare a list of potential cuts since we have to act first. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Monson. And I just wanted to provide a brief overview for council of some of the things that we're working on, although we are faced with the type of uncertainty that you just heard from Ori. One of the things that I think is really important, and we've received lots of questions around summer programming, and I wanted to provide a brief overview this morning of the type of summer program that will be made available, albeit virtual. So we have now designed programming for the summer that has been designed to serve up to 35,000 students in grades K through 12. In order to, and one of the first things that we think most important to prevent any further learning loss that is likely to ensue because of the amount of time that children are not in classrooms. We also want to promote the successful transition, particularly at the critical years, from middle to high, from elementary to middle, and from high to post-secondary options. We also want to support many of our most vulnerable students, those children who are newcomers and they're English learners, and many of our young people with special needs. Registration and eligibility information will be shared. It is shared on our district website, or it could be shared via each school's, it could be shared from each school directly to the parents. Next slide, please. We've been talking a lot about the continuity of education plan, and we are now in the 4th phase of that plan. The plan began the following the day that was the last day that we were in school on March 13th. We started with the printed learning guides that were made available both on the district's website and at grab-and-go meal sites. And then it moved into learning guides that also had supports or supplemental materials for English language learners and students with IEPs. Then we went to the implementation of enrichment and review, but it was led from a digital platform, and that was right at the inception of our distribution of all of the Chromebooks. And on May 4th, we began what is called planned instruction. That is teacher-led instruction. Most of that is also enrichment and review, but it does present an opportunity to provide new content to our students. The continuity of education plan, next slide please, includes the teacher interactions with students, which come in the form of 3 hours a day. That could be what we call synchronous all-together instruction or asynchronous engagement. It's in something that I'll call or refer to as office hours that all of the teachers have that will make themselves available. Instructional engagement and office hours include direct instruction to students, online support, feedback, and monitoring, and completion of independent tasks. We have a lot of information available on our website around this, including the things that students are being asked to work on each day, and you can see those things at a week at a time, and you can also see what is going to be asked the following week. Next slide, please. We were able to move to planned instruction because we have now completed, and we're still in the process of completing, because we still have young people picking up Chromebooks, but we've had some 84,000 Chromebooks. We purchased through the action of the Board of Education, so the action they took at an earlier meeting, we were able to purchase 40,000 new Chromebooks that have been distributed to schools. The total distribution, when you add those 40,000 to Chromebooks that were already in schools, is some 84,000 that have now been on loan to our young people. In addition to the Chromebooks, next slide, please, we have created other supports for our students. And we have digital content that is created weekly for teachers. This allows many of our English language learners to practice on the skills and develop those skills at the direction which are translated into 5 different languages. In addition, we've also utilized their special education content experts who have created and helped create learning guides, curriculum materials, and training for teachers of children with special needs. And we also have a team that is working directly with emergency housing providers and partner agencies to ensure that students who are experiencing homelessness or returning to school can also participate in remote learning. Next slide, please. The other question we're getting is, what is our plan for reopening? And we have an overarching reopening focus, and we want to make sure we can get young people back into schools as quickly and as safely as possible. And any reopening will adhere to CDC guidelines, state orders, and city and regional coordinated planning. We're doing a lot of planning with other school districts surrounding us, as well as other large urban districts like the School District of Philadelphia. And so it means that students and staff will likely be expected to wear masks and facial coverings, practice social distancing, and follow health and safety protocols. We are planning for multiple scenarios. 3 examples of those scenarios are all students and staff returning, some students and staff returning depending on a number of factors, students and staff remaining remote because of the impact of the pandemic. And we're organizing, and we've organized a set of work groups around this that are a set of overlapping teams that are also working with city agencies, with organizations like SEPTA and others, and looking at and analyzing all of the options that will be available for us as we actually begin to approach and think about reopening. Naturally, we're going to have more information that comes out about this, but the team is busy on an almost daily basis talking through options and considering and analyzing those options for the best approach. In addition, this morning, next slide, please, I wanted to also provide a facilities update. And because we've been able, as Councilwoman Kiana Sanchez indicated, we've been able to get into buildings earlier because buildings are not containing students at the moment. But we also have a lot of summer work that is happening in buildings as well. We are pursuing an aggressive construction program, utilizing the $500 million that was borrowed as a part of our capital program that includes 5 new schools or major additions that will start this summer, 6 major renovations underway or starting this summer, 12 schools that will be receiving classroom modernizations. That means 147 classrooms will be modernized in a way that is more conducive for our young learners, and over 30 building infrastructure projects that include roofs, boilers, electrical systems will also be underway this summer. 40 schools will have asbestos abatement in all or part of the building this summer as well. And this represents an investment of at least $8.5 million by the district. 25 additional schools will be made lead safe. And this year's program will utilize $4.3 million in Commonwealth funds with an additional $8.8 million of district funds. And by September, a total of 110 schools will qualify as lead safe. I will also add that since the closure, we've been able to restart lead abatement and asbestos abatement, and we've also restarted all of the HERA inspections to determine where there are imminent hazards. As I close this part of the testimony, I want to share a video that we shared with all staff because multiple individuals, including teachers, principals, and support staff, have all come together to provide supports to students and to families during this period of time. And I'm going to close with a short thank you video that we provided for all of the individuals in the school district and in the city. Council President, that concludes our testimony. And I want to make one correction. And one thing that you can never get wrong is the student's school. And I said that Doha Ibrahim was a Northeast senior. She's actually a senior from Lincoln High School. So should never make that mistake. And my apologies to Doha.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Height. Thank you so much for your testimony. We're going to proceed with questions. I wanted to start out with a couple of questions, particularly as it relates to your April 23rd presentation to the board. Just wanted to get a little clarity. In the April 23rd presentation, there was $38 million in unidentified cuts. In the most recent presentation, that has not been identified. And I want to start out by talking about the fact that City of Philadelphia obviously is experiencing some very difficult challenges as a result of the pandemic. Also, we have made and will be making some very, very difficult decisions. The mayor has submitted to us a very draconian budget proposal that calls for the elimination of a significant number of programs that are near and dear to a lot of individuals' hearts, a significant number of layoffs, shutdown of literally whole departments. Some very, very difficult decisions have to be made. I just need to get a sense for the $38 million in unidentified cuts that was proposed in the 23rd, but now being proposed. Have you what would those particular cuts have been? Would they be based on instructional aspects of your budget, or administrative, or other things relating to what you would have identified as those cuts?
Sorry. Thank you, Council President. This is Ori Monson. So obviously, the April 23rd was presented prior to the mayor's proposed budget, and at the time, we cannot approve a budget which has a negative fund balance. So we put it in that placeholder so that we knew we could determine those cuts. Subsequently, the city proposal and other revenue changes did not have a gap. As I mentioned before, we're dependent on the city and the state for revenues, so we still need to have a prepared list of cuts, just depending on obviously what happens with your budget or the state budget. And in honesty, looking forward, because we already have a $200 million deficit for the following year, and this is a long-term structural issue we want to be prepared for. On the first area, we were focused on proposals that would have as the least impact on student progress and achievement, and also avoid or minimize layoffs in the short term. And this is not a total list, but you're looking at everything from reduction of potential literacy supports, professional development opportunities, family engagement supports, behavioral support coaches, some recruitment efforts to maintain a fully staffed teaching corps, elimination of vacancies in maintenance and cleaners, reduction in certain technology supports. That's just a few. There's a longer list that we're still going through to try and be prepared, again, depending on what happens, since we have to go first, and also looking ahead to what we know we're going to have to do given our structural budget problem as it is currently constructed.
Right. So understanding that you're dependent on the city and the state for your revenue, we're dependent on the taxpayers. And at this particular time, the taxpayers are hurting. And this is difficult times for everybody. The simple reality is that the traditional go-to, i.e., our ability to stick our hands in the taxpayer's pocket, is not the same this time around, because a lot of those pockets are empty. So I say that in terms of, all of us having to make these difficult decisions as it relates to how we deal with our workforce. I just want you to keep that in mind as we go through our process in terms of additional revenues that you all have asked for now in this particular most recent budget proposal that was not asked for in the April 23rd budget proposal. I want you to be mindful of that. Another thing, a couple other things. I wanted to ask you with respect to projections. if at some point, and I'm hoping it is relatively soon, in a very safe and healthy way, that the city of Philadelphia moves to yellow. And you referenced earlier about the fact that with the governor likely signing the new legislation as it relates to the liquor by the drink that allows to-go drinks. And additionally, the possibility of opening of some stores that are currently not, or some level of commercial property not paying UNO projections. Have you looked at the potential of all of these revenue sources based on the change of the status of the city of Philadelphia per the governor's ruling?
We have, Council President, and we made certain assumptions that the city would be reopened. I'll say not normal as usual, but by July 1st. We did make some adjustments, liquor by the drink, once we knew that bill was progressing. This is, as we've all been talking about, an unusual and unprecedented circumstance. So we're working with the best information we have, and we're constantly updating. I usually joke that the numbers we provide are good for the next hour at least until we get additional information. But we are constantly making those adjustments, and the most recent numbers we put out last Thursday do incorporate a number of the issues you raised.
Okay, and the level of specificity that we could clearly see the relationship in that particular phase and the potential revenues associated with that phase and openings and operations?
Yes, we made certain assumptions that basically of kind of the revenue that's lost, particularly liquor by the drink, extremely suppressed for these few months through the end of June, and it's beginning to come back in July. And now that we had some information, actually the city was able to, their city collects the taxes for us, so we were able to see the actual results for April and even the first 10 days of May and make adjustments based on that in every individual tax with that additional information.
Okay. I guess this question would be for Dr. Height. You referenced the opportunity that presented itself by closing buildings as a result of the pandemic and the construction aspect of that. Is this allowed us to accelerate construction activities in all of the various schools, or is this the traditional normal pace that has been projected?
No, it is. We've been able to get into additional schools and actually complete some of the work that was scheduled for this summer, particularly around some of the lead projects and the asbestos projects. And so we've now completed, I believe, 6 schools that were slated for work later this summer, and other projects are being scheduled as well. So we are slightly ahead of schedule on some of those projects that we were able to get in and take advantage of children not being in those buildings during this period of time.
All right. I mean, was it by months or maybe a year? I'm just trying to get a sense of revenues. It's all about revenues now. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday and the day before is the ability to maximize those particular industries that are allowed under this most recent order to work, and therefore provide additional revenues to the city of Philadelphia. And I'm just trying to get a sense that if we've expedited our construction schedule in schools, maybe as much as a year, then that's revenue that we had not anticipated in our earlier projections on the city side, i.e. tax collection and other activities associated with construction. You know, can we take that into account? And it's basically, I know it's not your responsibility to gauge those revenues because we do collect the revenues from the individuals, but I was just trying to get a sense. If it's a year, it could make a difference. If it's 2 months, I don't think it's that much of a difference. So that's why I'm trying to get a sense of the timeline.
Yeah, and yes, Council President, it has not been accelerated by a year. No, and it's been more months that we were able to accelerate the work, and a lot of that is based on capacity, but we now have more capacity, as you indicated, to do some of this work. So it allows us to do the work, but the design, one of the challenges with accelerating it is you also have to do the design work, particularly around the big construction projects, and that takes time as well. And so we could not accelerate it a year, but we could be in front of it several months.
All right, and the asbestos removal, that was accelerated?
Yes, that was definitely accelerated, and we were able to actually complete projects that were this summer that allows us to then get to other projects this summer, as long as we have the funds available to do that, because all of asbestos removal cannot be done with capital monies because it doesn't qualify as a capital expense. Unless it's related to the actual construction or modernization or a new roof or something like that. If it's capital, if it's all capital, it doesn't support asbestos by itself, asbestos removal by itself, or lead paint abatement by itself. It has to be a part of a larger project.
Right. One last question for this round. You referenced the no changes in the current labor contract. What does that mean in terms of the sequence of labor contracts? Was there a contract that was up for negotiation or termination or expiration of an existing contract?
So, Council President, we build into the plan whatever existing contracts we have. Our two largest contracts, the PFT contract and the 32BJ contracts, both expire at the end of this summer. And there are no additional costs associated with those contracts, which we have been negotiating with both groups since January, I believe.
Okay, just wanted to get a sense for reference to that. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, my co-chair, and members, 5 minutes, please. It's been working for the last couple of days, so if we continue that process, it will be very helpful. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Council President, and we will honor the clock. The two questions for Ori and then for Dr. Height and Joyce Wilkerson. As it relates to the budget, Ori, we've seen the federal and state numbers move, and I was encouraged to see that the state was not asking for a waiver on the maintenance of efforts issues. Is there anything else in that budget that's precarious that we should be concerned about that might change what you're projecting from the federal and state? So that's question number one. And then two, in line with what Council President is asking around projections, did the district get its own expert to review some of the city projections to make sure they're in line? One of the difficult parts for us is we can talk about expenses, but the projection piece, we do have to somewhat leave for the experts. It's an unprecedented time. And were you consulted with some of the decisions they made around zeroing out PPA and some of the others? So that's a question for you, Ori.
Thank you, Councilwoman. In terms of using outside, first dealing with state and federal, I would say at this point the federal can only go up if there's another wave. The state identified what we would get from that. There's still a small piece of a governor's emergency education fund, which has not been determined what we might get from that. So there could be some additional funding there. And again, the state, in theory, should only be able to go up since they did not apply for the waiver. In terms of our projections, so we rely on the city for the real estate projections. And we use their assumptions as a basis for how we look at the use and occupancy projections. All the others are projections that we do ourselves based on trends we're seeing, actual collections, historic trends, speaking with economists, local economists, personally, both, and also what they're putting out publicly, looking at market trends. I think I'm on every mailing list from every bank and brokerage firm and everything they send out regarding their viewpoint on the economy. We do not hire anybody else to vet our projections. but we're pretty comfortable with our process. And again, real estate's the only one that we take the city's numbers straight, and we've always done that since the city is both the collector of those taxes and does the assessments of the taxes. It's the safest approach for us in there.
How about use and occupancy with their projections around people returning, particularly folks from outside the city, and offices activating? Are you reviewing those numbers?
So we are. So they're the baseline of what we use, but then we layer on top of it what we're seeing in actual collections. And as I mentioned earlier in my comments to Council President, we have, the city was very prompt in getting us numbers through, I believe it was May 10th or May 11th. So we had very up-to-date numbers. We could see already initial impact. I think, to be perfectly frank, the hardest thing for us to predict is what the new normal will be like, what things come back. We did, again, based on discussions, take a percentage down from what would have been normal growth for next year. And we pretty much lost the majority of the last quarter of this year. For next year, we have, it's somewhere roughly 10% down from where we thought we'd be originally, and on a lower base now. So there is a significant cut in there. But I think it's one of those areas that, and it's true talking to local and national economists as well, we're all kind of waiting to see what the new normal looks like, how soon we come back, what coming back looks like. And obviously some sectors of the business community are going to be impacted more than others.
Thank you. We look forward to, again, and monitoring. I know the HEROES Act was presented, and it's encouraging to know that there is potential for growth in the federal and state funding, since, the city and this council in particular has been as aggressively supporting the school district as possible, but it'd be, that's a promising note. To Dr. Haidt and Joyce Wilkerson in particular, and again, I want to thank all of you. This has been really an incredible time, and people have stepped up, and to the teachers and staff and everything is real important. One of the discussions we've had as with the education committee has been, and I think Joyce, you call it the guardrails. Can you, for the benefit of my colleagues and others, speak to us around the agreements that the decisions about what gets cut will not be financial decisions, but they will be student-centered. Can you talk to us about those value-based guardrails that we've talked about?
Yeah, the board is working on goals. Goals would be, what it is that we expect, the kind of student outcomes we expect to see from the district. And guardrails are those kinds of programs that can't be jeopardized in reaching the goals, the academic goals that we have. Historically, the board, the SRC, and then the board has not really focused on student outcomes. If you look at our meetings, there have been studies done, 10% of the time was spent talking about, are the kids learning? We spend our time talking about the conditions of the buildings, which is important, but we don't pay any attention to, are the children learning? So the board is pivoting to a much heavier focus on student achievement, students learning literacy, math, and are they graduating with the kinds of skills that they need, or with the ability to go to college. So we're going to be asking very specific questions about that. But education is not simply about our kids passing tests. It has a lot to do with, our children supported? Do they have the behavioral health supports that they need? Are the buildings in good condition? Do families feel welcome in the school? Is it a place where teachers want to be? Do they have the art and music and the other kind of enrichment opportunities that they need? So we're going to be, very focused on, are they learning, and are the supports in place that they need? And so when we look at the budget moving forward, those are going to be the elements that we're going to be most actively protecting. The things that lead to students learning math, literacy, and able to graduate with meaningful skills, and to the extent that we can, protecting those guardrails. Like we talked about at the committee meeting, and we'll be reaching out to the city for supports. The city is already committed to supporting us around the behavioral health. And thanks to you, Councilwoman, and other council members, the city has really stepped up to the plate, and we'll be relying on the city for that. But there are other areas where, we we will be looking for outside support so that as we face our contraction, we're not completely completely unable to address those things that the board has established as priorities.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Thank you very much, Council President. Good morning, everybody. First, I want to congratulate the students, teachers, and families of the class of 2020, of whom Doa Ibrahim is an outstanding example. And I certainly encourage all my colleagues and anyone who is watching to engage with her testimony because of the powerful words that she gave to the importance of funding equity, school advocacy, and especially to the commitment around our neighborhood schools. I'm also here on City Council in large part because of what the school district chose to do in the wake of austerity back in 2012 and 2013. All my 3 children were in public schools during that time and experienced the massive budget cuts and layoffs that deprived so many young people of their basic rights to an education. And I just want to open by saying that, both to all folks who are watching, but austerity is a choice. And we are not helpless collateral damage to all of this. We are in charge. We are decision makers. And one of the things that I hope that we can have with this conversation is the lessons we've learned from the past. So one of the goals of, I know that has been stated in the budget, and especially in terms of expenditure reductions, has been decisions and lessons learned that from the 2013 budget cuts. So can you speak to that review process and what findings you've had, and also in particular how you're making sure that neighborhood public schools are supported and prioritized in the budget that you've laid out?
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman, and we'll be glad to speak to that because we actually had to deal with some significant revenue challenges back as a result of the recession that occurred in 2010. And as a result of that, we then had large that we had to actually overcome. And so as you had 3 children in public schools and all other individuals who had children in public schools, and many of our students remember opening schools with only teachers and principals. And while we were trying to protect classrooms, the fact that everything else was peeled away did not necessarily protect classrooms. And so we lost supports for students. We lost individuals who were maintaining buildings and doing that work. And we saw the byproduct of that with many of the environmental issues. We lost the ability to have regular back office functions like payroll and delivering term pay for individuals who had left the system. And so it impacted our ability, although we were trying to protect the classrooms at all costs, there's so many other things that go into making sure children have a well-rounded experience. And so the distinction this time is that the board has established goals and guardrails, as you heard from the board president. We're actually going to lead with all of the things that are necessary in order to meet those goals and guardrails and really prioritize our ability to do that work moving forward. I would also add just real briefly, though, that trying to prevent moving forward a $200 million deficit that compounds year after year is also really important action that we have to take now, or we'll be right back to that place again.
No, I understand. I appreciate that. I also recognize that the district has not been made whole since the 2013 budget cuts from the state in particular, and that should be a major focus of our council body as well. But I just also want to make clear that I don't think that there is a lot of clarity about what the goals and guardrails are. I know we've been on a number of different calls, and I think that there just needs to continue to be more clarity about the questions that my council chair asked about what specifically they are, because it's still hard to discern how neighborhood schools in particular are going to be protected and prioritized and all of that. I do want to move on to a couple more questions because of the shortness of time. I wanted to clarify very quickly. You said that asbestos removal is not considered construction, as opposed to like asbestos remediation, I would consider under operating budget. But you're saying that even asbestos removal, which would require the entire removal of whole sections of a school, would not fall under your capital projects?
Construction, it's not considered capital. And Ori could explain that behind rules around the bonding or capital fund.
No, that's okay. I think I'll follow up with a later thing. Thank you very much, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We'll come back to that question. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones. Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your patience in me finding the mute switch. First, let me start by thanking Dr. Height and the school district for so many things while they operated in a pandemic. But one thing in particular was the food distribution that they did throughout the city. It took care of a lot of needy students dealing with hunger, but it also, if we keep it real, some families and adults that were also food deprived as well. So I want to give you thank you for that distribution. Secondly, from all of the schools in my district, the Chromebook distribution went well. And a lot of people are challenged, however, both parents who are teaching their kids from home with never having to teach, never having to have that responsibility even with their own children. So the concept of the parent university to assist not only parents that have to learn how to discipline themselves on how to teach their children, is that aid being provided to them through some means? That's number one. And then number two, and I hope it is true, that we do open back in September. But if we do, what measures are being put in place, such as, does the nurse now take on the responsibility of temperature checks? And how does the nurse know when a child should be sent home? And are we training them up to be able to deal with this new reality of COVID?
Thank you, Councilman Jones, for the questions. And so to the first question, the yes is the answer. We have established what we call some virtual town halls that our family and community engagement has created for families to do just what you just described. And it's to help. It's also for families just to come together and talk with staff about frustrations or things that they're experiencing or hardships. But we always had a parent academy, but now we have retooled that to be virtual so that it could do some of what you just described, in addition to the hotlines that we've made available. To your second question about the school reopening, we will have a set of protocols for the responsibilities of all individuals, including nurses, administrators, counselors, teachers, and every adult who will be in the school. That's part of a process that we are reviewing right now to determine, will we have temperature checks done by an individual, or will we have a station? Are we able to scan and scan in children each day? And during that scan, we can take temperatures, or the scanning device takes the temperature, so we're looking at multiple ways to do that, and the responsibilities of individuals who support our children, like nurses, would likely change, and it's going to be a lot more responsibility around paying attention to temperature changes in our student populations.
Particularly for younger students, I have this recurring nightmare because of my grandkids of a COVID recess, where kids are running around not recognizing social distances. My grandkids do not understand why they have to have a mask on. How are we going to, in September, kind of address that issue? And then finally, this question comes from Angel Rivera and Jordan Miner, who are from the graduating class of 2020. And they want to know why they can't have caps and gowns at their virtual graduation, considering they got their Chromebook and their lunches and meals dealt with through a process of distribution.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so your first question was about particularly with young children, recess. We have to, all of those are part of the consideration. So how children will, what would be some of the behaviors we will be anticipating. We will have to start this and begin to socialize this a long time before September with their families in terms of what they should expect, and with our younger students in terms of what they should expect as well. With respect to the two seniors, one of the things so we're doing a virtual graduation. We're also doing virtual graduations for every high school. There are also high schools that have indicated that they will do in-person graduations later when at such time that there's clearance in order to do those things. All of the things we've been distributing, like meals, Chromebooks, have been done from the district simply because it's one standard that we can provide for everyone. Caps and gowns are very different. All schools, many schools have their own colors. Many schools order their own, and that becomes very much a school-driven process that it would be very hard for us as a central office to engage in, nor do we have the capacity to do that right now. And so that has been what has created the cap and gown challenge for us, because it is very personalized to the high school, and with 54 high schools, it's just hard for us to do something like that centrally.
So one answer 2020 might be that we only do black and white citywide. One color, one class, one COVID-19 graduation. Just a thought. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to each of you. Ori, I want to start with you, and I just want you to, if you have these numbers, without regards to HEROES Act and or CARES, usually on an annual basis, or the school district has a number of projected revenue that it hopes to receive from local government and also from state government. Do you have very specific numbers that you are expecting in your formula that make the district whole for the state, and then what's the number for local government?
What we have right now as our projection for 21 is from the state total receipts, which includes basic ed, special ed reimbursements, vocational ed programs, and there's a whole list of things, is about a little over $1.6 billion.
Okay.
1.619 billion.
Okay, and then local.
So local, and this includes the proposed. Actually, let me show the right number. Hold on. Wait. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong column. Just make sure I have it correct. I'm sorry, 1.616, not 19, and then city and local is tax revenue of 1.367 billion, and then an additional 269 million in non-tax.
And non-tax.
Yeah, so it's about 1.6. 1.64, 1.63.
And listen, the reason why I just wanted us to just be able to literally quantify what the state number is, what the local number is because obviously no one wants to see the school district make any unnecessary cuts. But one of the responses that we've been constantly getting, and we've had to attempt to explain to people when they think about school buildings being closed, and they talk about, well, what has the district saved as a result of school buildings closed? And then we have to talk about the high amount of fixed costs associated with just having the buildings and then some of the other improvements that are being made. And so I appreciate those numbers. Let me go to Dr. Height now. Dr. Height, COVID has actually brought to the forefront a number of disparities that existed pre-COVID, right? But it's just brought them to the forefront, took the mask off, and now we can see them clear. And I'm referencing the digital divide. Yep. I think a great job relative to the distribution of the Chromebooks, but I was very interested in trying to figure out, even amongst the distribution, how many young people had challenges accessing the programmatic content because they did not have access to the internet. And do you have any data that reflects where connectivity was bad in certain regions of the city? That kind of data and information is extremely important.
We do, and thank you for the question. And I've been told my camera is off, but my camera is on. So if it's not working, my camera is on. So yes, it exposed some access, and so we wanted to resolve that by providing all young people with the Chromebooks. But in addition to your point, Councilwoman Parker, we have areas of the city, and if you overlaid a heat map on everything, I mean, and it's some of the same communities that have many of the other challenges, and those are communities where there is not a lot of internet access, and so we've tried to ameliorate that with providing as much information as we can for our families in terms of all of the free or reduced Wi-Fi opportunities that are out there. In addition, we're able to purchase 2,500 mobile devices that we can provide to our most needy children in a prioritized fashion. But those 2,500 devices are only for 1 year, and those devices cost as much as the actual computer. And
right.
It's not a solution. It's not a long-term solution.
Right. Well, listen, and I appreciate that. Dr. Height, if you will, and I'll get to other questions during the second round. I heard the bell. And I have not seen it if you have already provided it, but we would definitely like to see a map indicating where you have had to issue those hot spots, because we as a city need to determine where we need to direct more access to connectivity relative to the internet access. Yes. Well, I don't care if we're talking about public-private partnerships. We need that data so that we're driving the technology and all of the instruments needed to the neighborhoods that actually need them. Thank you, Mr. President, and I have more questions during the second round.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gauthier.
Thank you, Council President. I want to start by thanking Dr. Height, the board, and all the teachers and staff for standing up a system of support for our kids during unprecedented times. It's meant a lot to so many district parents, including me, so thank you very much. My question is, I'm wondering how this budget incorporates recommendations from City Council's recent Poverty Action Plan, specifically increasing high school dual credit programs for associate degrees, partnering with the building trades and vocational education, and providing early college and college exposure. Can you speak to that?
I can. So yes, we have expanded all of those opportunities as a part of the poverty reduction plan, and more young people who actually are able to access career and technical opportunities. We are working with labor to provide opportunities for young people to also experience those trades. We've instituted new programs like a solar installation program at 2 of our high schools. And so we've been able to utilize this. But I will also add that many of the goals in the poverty reduction plan are also things that are highlighted through the board's goals and through the board's guardrails. And so those things are very consistent with what the board has directed in terms of their goals for the school district.
Thank you. It'd be great if it's possible to have a better understanding of that, of how your plans align with the Poverty Action Plan.
Right.
Thank you. The district has a number of partnerships with major institutions to support our schools across the city. Examples are the Philadelphia Zoo and McMichael Elementary, UPenn with Penn Alexander. I'm wondering, in these tough economic times, how you're leveraging those partnerships and developing new ones to support remote learning and maybe to even supplement technology needs.
Thank you. And we've had significant support from partners to both supplement technology needs, to get some of the mobile devices and Wi-Fi access. We have coming up a big announcement from the University of Pennsylvania, who is doing a summer program for all rising seniors, anyone who is interested. And so, yes, those partnerships are really important. And individuals or organizations like WHYY is helping to broadcast content for the continuity of education. So lots of partnerships, lots of individuals and organizations stepping up to assist. The American Heart Association, lots of groups that are trying to assist us with dealing through this environment with these circumstances.
Thank you. And my last question for this round, I wanted to go back to this discussion of the assumption of no additional labor cost. Can you clarify? You mentioned that you have a few contracts that are ending. Are you saying that you're in negotiation on those contracts, or that those contracts, the new contracts, are settled? And if you're in negotiation, how could you assume no additional labor costs?
We are in negotiation. The contracts are not settled, and part of negotiation is we begin from zero. Traditionally, and the city follows the same approach, or has followed the approach in the past. We do not put anything in because it sets a floor for negotiation rather than being a part of negotiation. So, and that's the way we've operated in our 5-year plan throughout.
But for the purposes of making a conservative budget forecast, I mean, those are areas that could be subject to change.
Well, they're going to presume, I can't speak to exactly the terms of a contract, and I prefer not to negotiate in public, obviously. But those are all issues that we deal with, and any contract can have some, total cost can be a combination of savings in some areas because of changes versus additional costs in salaries or benefits, or some combination thereof. It's something we obviously will have to work with our labor partners to come to something that is fair for everybody, deals with all the work rule issues, and we obviously have a different world of work rules that we have to deal with, I think, in a 21st century school environment. So I think all those issues are on the table. But we don't assume anything for that at this point in the negotiations.
That's all for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green. Councilman, can't hear you. Still can't hear you. No.
How about now?
Got you.
Okay, just having a little delay in technology there. Sorry about that. I want to thank you, Council President. I want to thank the teachers and administration in the school district. As a parent with a child in the district, it's been very challenging, but I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing and getting out the food as well as the Chromebooks. But I do have a couple of questions. One, I want to follow up on a statement that Ori said in his testimony. You stated that the school district supports the property tax that was proposed. However, isn't the district really agnostic as long as the amount of the city grant dollars that's been proposed comes to the district?
So I'll have to go back on the tape and see. I don't believe I said supported. What I put out is that what was proposed would fill the gap in its entirety, and it's a combination of things in there. Generally speaking, it's not the district's job to determine how funding gaps are filled, whether it's filled by city, state, or cuts. They're all things that will be on the table. We're agnostic about that. But what we have done in the past for years is whatever has been proposed by an executive, so governor, mayor, the president, those are the things we put into the budget. But I agree with you that we are agnostic on how the gap is filled. Our concern is that the gap be filled in a way that is least impactful on students.
This is a question for Dr. Height. Dr. Height, you talked about the $500 million have been allocated to make improvements in the school buildings. In the past, when the district has made improvements to school buildings, some of that work had to be redone based on the oversight from the Federation of Teachers and some of their experts. Have you been working with the PFT as you've been making these improvements to the buildings, and then you plan to use up that entire $500 million before students return back in September? If Dr. Height's not available, if someone else from the district can answer the question.
This is Ori. I think we're going to try and get Jim Creedon to respond.
I'm sorry. I was actually responding and I was on mute. I apologize. I turned on the camera, but not the thing. Councilor Green, what I was saying was that, yes, we continue to work very closely with PFT. We have weekly update calls with them to discuss construction issues, asbestos issues, lead paint issues. We're particularly appreciative of the fact that the city hired ARC Environmental to help us take a look at our asbestos practices and protocols jointly with the PFT and with 32BJ. And we're anxious to see that study wrap up in the early part of June. We'll have a set of protocols that we all can follow and check off the boxes as we work through these very complicated projects. As far as spending all $500 million by the time school comes back, the $500 million is programmed over a series of years that involves the design and construction of many projects. Right now, the projects which are underway over the course of their entire spending, which may be over multiple years, including over the last year itself, represents about a $400 million investment by the district.
Okay. I want to go back to Ori Monson. Ori, I just have a question in reference to the collection of the school income tax. In your budget detail, you anticipate the projections to be on target. Do you think there'll be any lagging receipt of the school income tax dollars?
In our projections, we actually have it down a little bit this year. It has been lagging. It's a little hard to tell, again, because confusion over some of the deadlines were moved for some of the tax receipts, penalties for related to not meeting those deadlines, and also understandably, especially for those paying directly, there's a slight delay in the city's collection and ability to report out to us what is. So given the lag, we have a small drop, a couple $1 million drop this year, which is an area that hopefully will change a little bit. And then we have it coming back to not a growth level, but kind of a resetting a level base for next year and going forward. It is one of the areas of concern we highlighted before, just because it's coming in slowly.
This is my last question, and I'll come back in the second round. There's been some conversation about how we come back in the fall and a second wave. I've already seen charter schools start to do an increase in advertising. Are there any concerns, and have any projections been put into your budget about a possible increase in student enrollment in charter schools, as well as any concerns about SEPTA and students being able to ride SEPTA and additional expenses you put into your budget based on a possible second wave?
So we still base our charter estimates on the trends we've been seeing school by school, anything that is approved, already approved by the board, or if there are closures we know that are coming, which has kind of been both ends of that cycle. The other thing that we've, in speaking to some folks, is it's possible because the economy that some children who are currently in private school may actually come back to the district. So there's kind of two sides to that economic coin. At the moment, we have not made any adjustments. There were some trends we saw after the last recession in terms of some students coming back in the overall, whether they're going to charter or district, that could have an impact as well. At this point, it's too early to tell, although we do have, we are continuing to collect charter information. Charters are updating the system for enrollment, for where children are, and as we get more information, we'll continue those updates. I think there are going to be some very interesting issues in the fall about where students go, and we're going to have to play it out as we see it, and it'll depend on what is able to open, obviously, and if there's any more, the state froze everything effectively as of March 13th in terms of where students are. So I think as that rolls off at the end of the school year, if there's any more directives from the state, could also have an impact as well.
Thank you, Council President. I have more questions in the second round.
Sorry. Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. Good morning. Let me start off by just acknowledging the work of Mayor Kenny, then Chair Joyce Wilkerson, Commissioners Estelle Richmond and Chris McGinley for the dissolving of the SRC and the return of local control with Governor Wolf. I will say, however, and no, that's great, the local control, but I would encourage Harrisburg to return the parking authority and its revenues on street parking back to the city, which was taken to fund the Philadelphia schools. The money comes off of the streets of Philadelphia. That money is critical. We do not get funding from the state in the amount that we need, but they are taking the money off of our streets to fund things that have nothing to do with education. That was the claim in court, that the state needed to take over the parking authority to fund the schools. I will just say that I too have received, questions about the cap and gown. As Councilman Jones mentioned, a lot of parents, their families, and students feel that this has been a tough 4 years for them, and now with COVID-19, it seems, not a great thing to ask for cap and gown. I know the problems. I appreciate everything you're doing, Dr. Height, and the school board and folks. Let me say that I agree with Council President and a lot of the people who represent the taxpayers. It is tough. People are unemployed, and to ask for a property tax increase on top of numerous property tax increases and overassessments in many cases is not something that I would support. $16 million, however, that doesn't seem to be a huge challenge despite the incredible challenge that we do have. In our discussions with the finance director, the $130 million did not come up, although Dr. Height did brief us on that. So let me say that I do think we can work through this. However, on another note, I do want to get an explanation, perhaps from Ori Monson. Maybe you don't have this information, but I want to know this about asbestos. In 1984, the school district said it spent $17.7 million to remove asbestos out of 290 schools.
Bill Height
is now joining.
3 years later, in 1990, the school district stated that it deferred $4 million from asbestos removal. Then in 1989, the school district stated that it would need to spend $425.6 million to remove asbestos from 400 buildings, including 291 buildings where children attended the schools, and I assume they're not talking about teenagers. The school district said it spent $50 million to remove asbestos and expected to spend another $75.8 million. That's a total of $125.8 million just in that area to remove asbestos. And now it appears that there is an additional $12 million set aside, plus 13.7, including the money that is now for asbestos remediation, removal, and some for lead. That's $172.1 million. Is there a record of who got paid this money? What was done about removal and remediation? Because from a 1989 news article, there was very specific. They took asbestos out in 20-pound bags in hazmat suits with careful records of where each bag went. I would like to know where did this money go for asbestos removal, and why do we continue to deal with asbestos removal and remediation in 2021?
So I'm a little limited in my ability to respond to questions from the 80s. I was in Philadelphia at the time, but on the student side of that. And I know there were, at different points, there was some litigation which the school district specifically got funds to do asbestos removal and remediation. I can look back on that and try and figure out if it happened. What I will also tell you, knowing and I'm not necessarily the best person to speak on all aspects, but generally speaking, the approach has been with asbestos, if it's not disturbed, you don't touch it. It's actually worse. So there may be cases where they took out what was disturbed and left behind, and then over time, because of maintenance challenges and whatever, that asbestos remaining asbestos could have become disturbed or loose or have those issues. So that could explain why it's a constantly evolving issue over time. In terms of the specific dollars and what was spent, it may take a little while to do that research, but we can work on that and get back to the council president, to you, when we have that information.
Thank you. I'll be very clear. I understand how the remediation works, coating it, chipping away, removing loose pieces. However, the amounts of money and the details indicate removal and remediation at a serious level with very detailed accounting of 20-pound bags and other things. I would like to know who got paid, and I am very interested in if there is liability and money owed. I know it was a long time ago, but there seems to be a big problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Trying to get that information for you. She recognizes Councilwoman Brooks.
Thank you, Council President. I want to start off by also thanking Dr. Height, and a special thank you to Hania Brown as well as Evelyn Sample Oates for being very responsive to my multiple programmatic concerns and issues. So I want to start off with that. But today I have a lot of questions about the increasing costs. So according to the budget documents, there are three primary drivers for the increase of expenses. It's increased charter school costs, increased debt payments, and additional instruction expenditures. So while I fully support increasing it for instruction, I have some questions about the other two. One is the charter school cost. First, charter school payments have increased by 18% of the operating obligations from FY11 to a projected 33% in FY20. This number will continue to grow and will increase by $114.2 million from FY20 to FY21. What is the district plan to address these ongoing costs?
So, thank you for your question and good morning. The charter costs are formula driven by the state formulas, and as we've been discussing, it's not a surprise for the cost to be roughly 33% of the budget because the charters serve about 33% of the kids. So that there's a correlation there that makes sense. What's been troubling to the district is that, particularly because of the way the special ed formula works, there is the special ed costs are growing at a rate exponentially faster than the number of students being served. It's actually the issue that the governor had proposed to deal with in his original budget, and it's one of the reasons that we actually had a balanced 5-year plan budget for a brief moment before COVID hit, which I will remember fondly. It is, and you can actually see it in our current budget, that problem where even where we are cutting back on our costs, we are, if you look at the, and district costs are growing at less than 1% over the 5 years. Charter school costs are still growing at 4.6% on average over the 5 years. And that's really due to that inequity in the funding formula. It's something that we continue to advocate for change. The board president spoke about it in her opening remarks. If we would like it to be fair that all students in Philadelphia have the same resources being spent on them, regardless of whether or not they're attending charter schools or district-operated schools.
So are you saying by addressing these issues in the special ed funding formula, we can help get the charter school course costs under control?
They would correlate more closely to what we're spending on district students. So, for example, if we got an influx of money that we were spending on district students, additional resources of different counselors, that would also extend to the charter schools. They should be growing at the same rate. And as that, so the issue is to get that equity back, that we're growing at the same rate. And the problem right now is that particularly because of the special ed formula, it's just not growing at the same rate, and it's creating that increasing inequity. So pretty soon we'll get to the point where charter students represent 37% of our population, but over 40% of the cost in the budget. And it's that trend that we would like to control.
Councilwoman, this is Joyce Wilkerson. It's one of those issues we've been weighing in on and organizing with other districts around the state. There are more than 220 school districts that have passed resolutions calling on the state legislature to fix the charter school special education funding problem. And it would involve no additional revenue from the state if they just made the correction. So we're lobbying aggressively in support of that change.
Councilwoman, we're not hearing you. Try it again.
I got it. Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Another one of the primary drivers of the district's budget increase is a $23 million jump in debt payments. Can you explain what the long-term plan is for the district's debt? And should we expect these debt payments to continue to increase? And what are the plans in place to limit the increases year after year?
Thank you for your question. We actually take the debt burden very seriously. What is reflected in this one-year jump is because we did the $500 million borrowing last November. We have continued to work We set up, we set an internal policy that our debt should be no more than 10% of our expenditures to limit fixed costs. So several years ago, it had reached 13, 14%, so that in an environment where you have to make cuts or looking at, it's a fixed cost which you can't deal with. So throughout the 5-year plan, we have assumptions of borrowing about $250 million every other year, and built in that so that the debt stretches out over time. It never goes above the 10%, and we're trying to manage the debt, balance out what we borrow, and keep debt reasonable at the same time recognizing that we have several $billion of capital need. So trying to do that, and also at the same time do the capital need work as efficiently, as effectively as possible. The more we can do that, obviously use the money as best it can, that'll make it go further. So that combination of effort and the new project managers we brought in to help with setting up our capital plan to help with that as well. So that combination, we feel much more in control of our debt than we have in a long time. We've also, in 2016, and also when we did the $500 million borrowing, at the same time, effectively refinanced a lot of our high interest debt to lower interest debt and saved between the two deals over $50 million in interest costs over the next 20 years.
Thank you so much, Ori. I want to thank you again for being responsive to my team and the multiple questions that we sent ahead of time, and also to Joyce Wilkerson for being such an advocate on so many issues that are very important to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I, too, like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues in thanking Dr. Height, the administrators, but particularly the teachers and all of the staff in the school district and the board around how you've been able to really pivot, plan, and execute on the fly. And as a parent of a current 8th grader, I also like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues Jones and O around ensuring that the graduating seniors can receive caps and gowns for their graduation ceremony. Is truly a pivotal moment in their life, and we know that would be important to them moving forward during COVID-19. But I quickly wanted to, you were talking with Councilmember Brooks around the special ed formula and the inequity around the funding formula, and I just wanted to put this on the record based on my experience as a parent in the district around ensuring that the district is taking a keen look at student enrollment and placement and ensuring that we are not doing, from a school district perspective, the marketing for charter schools. And I just wanted to put that on the record. And I say that, and while saying that, I want to say thank you, most especially to Hania Sharp-Brown for all of the work you have done with my office. It has truly been a pleasure working with you and sorting out a number of these issues, and special thanks to Karen Lynch and Dr. Height as well. Wanted to focus on the preparation for the fall. Has the district begun to purchase masks and thermometers for students and for staff, and who is involved in this process? Are we consulting teachers and ensuring that also the PFT is involved in the process around the purchase of masks and thermometers in preparation for the fall?
Yes, Councilwoman, this is Bill Height, and hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Height.
Okay, great. So yes, we actually have started the purchase of thermometers. We are in the process of talking about masks, and we are involving as many individuals who would like to be involved in that process, in particular schools. We're meeting with all of the labor partners on a weekly basis, actually to both give input and to communicate information and to hear their concerns and recommendations as well. While everyone can hear me, I also want to respond to the earlier comments about the graduation. So I have, during this budget hearing, I've been told that we actually are working on a solution to get all of the caps and gowns from schools to a central location so that we can find a way to distribute those to our graduating seniors before the virtual graduation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Hyde. I know that will be vitally important to our graduating seniors. I also wanted to ask if you knew what the cost estimate is relative to any and all COVID-related expenditures around reopening, and on the federal side, relative to any federal dollars, do you anticipate that the school district will be able to receive any potential federal reimbursements for some of the lead and asbestos remediation work, knowing that COVID-19 really exacerbates your respiratory condition similar to lead and asbestos? Is there an opportunity for us from a funding perspective around continued remediation based on the traits of and what happens from a health perspective around COVID-19?
This is Ori, and thank you for the question. We're very carefully monitoring any funding opportunities that come about that we can access funding to deal with different issues. So whether it was money, obviously the CARES Act, everyone knows about, but FEMA and PEMA and any of the things we had to do in an emergent back in March, if there are any of those costs have been able to be covered through federal or state grants. And as additional information comes out about grants in the fall, basically any opportunity we get that we can use those grants. So far, nothing has come out that meets the criteria you just described. But obviously, if it comes up, and I'll say again, anything that comes out that we would have an opportunity to recover any of the costs we've expended relative to COVID, relative to the remote learning, any of those issues, we are very aggressive in going after those funds.
Okay, I heard the bell, Council President. On the next round, Uri, I just wanted to ask you a question around your testimony relative to the cleaners, okay, and then some environmental questions. I'll come back on the second round. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Down.
Thank you, Council President, and good morning. Dr. Height, thank you to your team, and Mr. Monson and the Board of Education and teachers, thank you. I'm encouraged by the changes that we've made and the willingness of the district to figure out how we maintain the education system in this environment. I just want to clarify something. In general, in your budget, and thank you for the time yesterday, you've outlined a 5-year plan that looks like we're $2 billion short. Is that accurate?
It's about a 5-year plan. Again, with the proposed budget change by the mayor, it's about $830 million short.
$830 million.
Yes.
Okay, because it says the ending fund balance for June 30th at the bottom. When you add those up, it comes to $2 billion.
But that's each year builds on itself. So the numbers cumulative. Yes, cumulative effect. So the 800 number at the bottom is the existing total cumulative deficit after 5 years.
Got it. So, and then just so I'm clear, the revenues of the city that are funding the school district, we're increasing about 2.6% a year?
I believe that's yes, it's on average about 2.6%. That's a combination of
several funding factors.
Yeah, a whole bunch of factors, yes.
And then, by the way, this is like a lightning round because we have limited time, so yes and no.
Understood.
District operating schools are doing very effectively, basically less than 1% a year increasing in expenses, the way this report reads, 0.7%, very effective. And as you pointed out, it's the charter school costs that are averaging 4.2% a year increase. That's the area that needs to be focused on. How would you go about, and I'm going to ask you to do this in less than a minute, how do you suggest this $800+ million gap over the next 5 years gets resolved?
In my 1 minute, I would say the best way to do it is would be the state to get back to at least the level of funding they were at the current year. Would be the first most important step, and fixing the inequities in the charter funding formula. That essentially was what was in our original budget back in March, and we were balanced for 5 years. Those two changes are basically allow us to live within our means and not have a structural deficit anymore.
So basically, in your presentation today, you're not asking the city for funding other than what the mayor has agreed to. You're just outlining for us what the shortages are over the next 5 years, and the goal is to get that from the state to make those charter changes.
Our goal, and we've said this publicly, has always been that we have no control.
Exiting.
We have no control over revenues. It's our job to make all of our funding partners aware of what we're looking at, what we're facing, what the issues are in that gap. We would hope that all of our partners can step up to fill those gaps as they occur. But there's no question that, and Dr. Haidt mentioned it earlier, just fixing the charter funding formula is actually no additional dollars from the state. It's just an equitable distribution of the dollars we get from the state. That would be a sea change. And then again, if this, the state funding levels should be at minimum, and President Wilkerson talked about this, at least what they are this year. And if we could get to that, then the state would be doing more of its share. I got 10 seconds left, I think. For about 20 years ago, the state was 57% of our funding. The city was 43%. It's now about 50-50, and that tells you all you need to know about how that has shifted over that time period.
Okay, thank you. One last question, then we'll go to the next round. In today's pandemic, it's clear to all of us, I believe, that the school district needs to do more, and we talked about this yesterday, incorporating technology into our core curriculum for all students pre-K to 12th grade to fill that knowledge gap for our students, and to also, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, create a tremendous workforce pipeline of technology-trained residents of our city. And when we talked about this yesterday, and you said you'd work on a plan to come back to us with what that might look like and what that cost might be, and I realize that's a big sea change, but now may be a good time for us to look at doing that sea change, because if we don't do it now, when will we do it? So my question is something we can expect to see from you over the next 30 days?
Is now joining.
So I'm not sure if Dr. Haidt wants to address. We did say.
Decisions on distributing those on a case-by-case basis.
So this is my question and my concern. So if I'm a parent, I have a couple of kids at home. I'm trying to figure out, how to help my children. At the same time, I'm also trying to figure out how I'm going to pay my rent or mortgage, how I'm going to keep food on the table, how I'm going to, all the things that need to happen right now. How am I applying for, the benefits that may be available through unemployment or other sources. And so with everything that's happening, the idea that, I have to reach out to the district and request these items may get beyond me. They may get by me. And so I think that a more proactive approach from the district in terms of making sure of us reaching out to each family and saying, what is it that you need? Do you have your Chromebook? Do you need your Chromebook? Do you have internet access, or do you still need it? Because giving out a Chromebook, in my opinion, it's a great thing, but it's a job half done if we don't make sure that they have the accompanying the accompanying internet access to be able to use the Chromebook. We might as well give them a piece of paper and a pencil and sit them down at a table and hope they figure it out that way if we don't give them internet access. So I know that you all have been working really, really hard on it, but I just really want to ask that we do some more digging and really reach down deep and figure out who needs what. I'm still not convinced that we are doing that, particularly in light of the recent article in the Inquirer, which said only 50 students were actually participating remotely. Dr. Haidt?
Yes. So yes, we will have a better accounting of who indicating, or, I mean, because we're asking, so we know who's participating now, we know who's not. We're asking questions in terms of why individuals are not participating. Some, not all, are talking about the challenges with internet access, and so that's how we're getting that information. The challenge with a more proactive approach is that we don't have the funds to actually solve the internet access problem, and that's going to take more concerted effort, and that's going to take more individuals, including the city, helping us to resolve that problem. We will be able to say, though, here are the places where children and families do not have the access they need in order to take advantage of the technology and the opportunities that we've provided.
I understand, and I'll come back around for a second question, Mr. President. I understand that we don't have the resources to provide the internet access, but again, if we're not providing the internet access, then it becomes just sort of futile to provide Chromebooks without the other materials that are absolutely necessary for them to be able to access their internet classroom. One goes hand in hand with the other. So I'll come back around with more questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla. Councilman Squilla.
There you go. I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute. Thank you all. Thank you, Council President. Appreciate it, Dr. Height and team. And I do want to thank Evelyn and all the district staffers over there who constantly be right up by our questions and always get back to us. And even if it's not an answer we like, it's still an answer, and we do appreciate that. I wanted to just go back to Councilmember Jones and Elle had mentioned about the reopening. And now that we have an opportunity here, and is it possible to look at an opportunity where maybe it's brick and mortar and a hybrid type operation where it's some cyber and some brick and mortar as we matriculate back in September?
Yes, those are some of the options we're also considering, Councilman Squilla.
All right, now do we see that as an added expense, or is that something that we could do within the current budget?
Yeah, we would have to put together all that's needed in order to do that. And so at this time, I could not say if that's an added expense or not. But we will have more information available in terms of how we will be able to put those types of opportunities and scenarios together. And then the scenarios, our ability to do the scenarios will be based on what we quite frankly can afford or what we cannot, and it will then guide the decision making in terms of the scenarios that we utilize.
Okay, so I think it's really important, and I know like Councilman Jones has said, how we reimagine ourselves in school, how that possibility of making sure we have protections in place and safety, and therefore, if this does happen again in our lifetimes, we are prepared and be able to manage this a lot better. But I mean, it's an opportunity to grow, and I see it as an opportunity to give the district better ways to communicate with our students, and use this as an opportunity to just grow. And if we're thinking that way now, and I know it's a lot of work, and you guys are trying to manage a lot of different things beside the budget, but I do think we should be looking into the future of how this looks. And I heard when you spoke to Councilmember Jones about what you were looking to do. I think it's great, and I'm glad we're thinking in that direction. I just didn't know if this, and I guess we'll know as our budget process plays through, if there is additional resources needed, and we'll have to manage as we work through this process.
That's correct. That's correct, Councilman Squilla. And then I also want to clarify a point I made. And so we also are thinking about taking advantage of the opportunities that the technology provides for us when all children have access. to the web and to everything else. And so taking advantage of that so that we don't just think about teaching and learning as a place-based thing. So you live in this community, that means you go to this school with these programs. We think now that more children will have access to more opportunities in and across the city because of the opportunity that the technology allows us to take advantage of.
I think that's great, and I think that's the way we need to start thinking, whether it's school or businesses or even politics and government. So I'm glad to see that's happening. One last thing, and as we talk about, and I know it's a challenge as we go through the virtual learning with the people with disabilities and different types of learning abilities. It seems like we're struggling a little with that, and I saw there was a current lawsuit. Is that something that we are also looking to try to bridge the gap?
And are you talking about children with disabilities, Councilman Squilla?
Yes.
So yes, we are trying to bridge the gap there. We're also following the guidance from the U.S. Department of Education and PDE, and we're trying to make as many accommodations and provide as much support as we can given the predicament that we're in. And so it's much harder to do some things virtually than in person, but by the same token, some of what you just described allows us to also think about unique ways to redirect more staff to children who need more services. And that's one thing that we're also thinking about, looking at this as an opportunity to think differently about how can we provide services that young people need.
All right, thank you. I'll come back in the second round. I do want to thank you, too, for looking into the asbestos and trying to get the buildings cleaned up while we're not using them. I think it's another great choice, and looking forward to hopefully clearing these schools so it's safe for when we do go back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan. Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Council President.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Height, the board, and all the staff working with City Council diligently and closely, along with the administration. We're all in it, for the same reasons, making sure that we get, the quality education that every student deserves, especially during these challenging times. And before I get right to the point of a few questions, I do have to take personal privilege to thank one of the students who submitted testimony today, as Dr. Height said that she couldn't join us, a student at Lincoln High School, Doha. She is a rock star, and she personifies a school district student, in the city of Philadelphia. She, I had the pleasure of working with her and her students that she put together in CPR training and a lot of other fellows. So I want to, congratulate her and all the accomplishments that she has made and with her graduation. And that's a testament to our teachers and our school district. So congratulations there, Dr. Height. A couple questions that I have is district specific for me. Distant High School or Distant Elementary, they went a half a year without a nurse, and the rest of the school year was part-time. And I say this because as we prepare towards September, and a lot of questions around social distancing and safety and the health and welfare of our students and staff, wanted to see where the school district was in preparing and making sure that our schools had full-time nurses and counselors at our schools as we prepare for alternative solutions and or different models as we approach September.
So thank you for the question, Councilman Heenan. And one of the things that we were able to do this past year was to have a pretty significant analysis done by the policy lab at CHOP, the Children's Hospital, and they made a series of recommendations for how we can provide support. And so, yes, we will have nurses available for all schools. Most of the year we had nurses available for all schools. This year, unless multiple nurses went out sick at one time. And we also had floaters, but those individuals were also assigned when there were more than just a few who were out for longer periods of time. And so, yes, our plan is to look at how nurses are assigned, base those on data from schools, and really try to follow the recommendations of the CHOP report, the policy lab report, around how we can ensure that we're meeting the health needs of all children, particularly given the set of circumstances we are faced with.
In some circumstances, I'm just going to reference my district. We have a lot of our schools that are overcrowded, and we have large amount of children in classrooms. So, and there is a school facilities plan for modulars, which I'll ask, and I'll submit, some of those questions to the chair or council president, so we can get over to you to see the status of the modulars in the school district as we, in my district, as we work through new catchment areas. But with the overcrowdedness and students coming back, I just want to make sure that we factor in, how we can ensure that the students are safe and that they can social distance in September's, and how the buildings are being redesigned and utilized for safety reasons with limited space. And I know that challenge is quite the challenge because of the timing of the budgets, as we've been discussing this week. We have to do our budget first, right? And then the state does this, and then there are going to be re-budgets, and the city's always going to be first, not knowing what kind of resources come, that are going to be availed to us via grants. So with that in mind, and all of the different scenarios that you guys are factoring in and planning for September, could that be some of the asks that the school district has to the state and to the federal government for additional resources for these types of scenarios? And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes is the short answer. Yes.
Thank you, Councilman. I want to recognize Councilman Thomas, and just want everybody to be cognizant of the time. We're quickly approaching 12:30, so the responses could be as short as possible also from the school district. Councilman Thomas?
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Council President. Thank you to my colleagues, and also thank you to Council Member Sanchez for your great work and your leadership with the Education Committee. I appreciate working with the district on a consistent basis. Last but not least, thank you to our teachers, all of our principals, school workers, and our children and families who had to make this amazing adjustment. Very briefly, I just want the folks on the call the folks in the hearing with us right now to spend a moment talking about what's going to happen with athletics and what they anticipate happening with the future of athletics. And that is it on my end, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I know how important that is to you, and it's clearly something that we need to address, because young people need to have that activity that brings that level of camaraderie. It's the one thing that we can all get our hands around is athletics. We're now going to the second round. I'm going to hand off to the Education Chair, Councilwoman Ori Sanchez. Councilwoman.
Thank you, Council President, and I'm going to encourage my colleagues to submit any questions, as Councilman Heenan alluded to, in writing. Both President Joyce Wilkerson and Dr. Height have made themselves readily available to us, and every single question will be answered and be made part of the record. So in that spirit, I'm going to ask my council colleagues, and I'm going to give you the order in which we have them so that people can be prepared and get online to the extent that they can do some lightning round questions. It would be greatly appreciated. I'm going to start with Council Member Gim.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for all your great work in getting us pulled together for all of this. So I had 3 very quick questions. We've had multiple comments on this call today about the importance of getting students online and the inequities and difficulties and expense around it. So my question is, has the city been of any assistance to the district on this effort? And has Comcast offered, for example, to temporarily open up its residential Wi-Fi hotspots to you?
Yes, the city has been helpful, and no, we did not have resident hotspots opened up other than Internet Essentials.
Has that been asked of Comcast or of Verizon or AT&T?
We asked that to all of the providers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, Comcast. When we first went out, we were trying to figure out who would. We were asking all the providers to provide what they could so that we could get individuals online.
Okay, so they were asked whether they could open up their Wi-Fi hotspots, and they declined. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. For Mr. Monson, for the PPA, you know, it's my understanding that the district and the city get to sit down with the PPA on all of its findings. You know, during its budget setting. That's correct, right?
We have periodic meetings with the PPA, attended by both of us, roughly, yes.
And so each of you has a perspective on the PPA's budget. And it's was there a discrepancy in what the district allocated for PPA contributions to the district versus what the city put in?
I think it's more of a timing issue in this case because unlike the rest of us, the PPA's budget year ends the end of March. So we already knew the assumption for the current year because we knew, and then all of this happened, obviously, and as if they have made the ongoing decisions regarding enforcement, regarding the garages, all the areas where they get their revenues.
So again, can we go back? Was there a discrepancy? It looks like the district put in for $10 million. The city has it in at 0.
There was a change, yes. I mean, it was our number came in earlier.
Do you think that's a fair? Like, do you think it leaves the PPA off the hook if you preemptively tell them that they're at 0?
Well, I think it's true in education. You know, expectations matter, and I think it matters in everything we do. It's obviously as there are additional numbers and we can see what how PPA is able to come back online and see, we'll continue to press for them to meet their, you know, the city gets paid first and then, you know, the district gets the leftovers, as I like to call it. So we'll be, you know, continuing to meet and see as they get better numbers, and we will do whatever we can to push on them if we believe there's opportunity for us to recover some funds.
Okay, but there's a discrepancy, and as you said, I think expectations matter, and it's very important to keep expectations clear, especially of entities. All of us are going to have to push at this time, and $10 million is $10 million. So one of the identified new expenses for the district in the 2021 school year is the need for cleaning and maintenance in order to keep our schools, continuing to deep clean our schools. And I want to thank the district for filling some of the vacancies. There are 112, for example, new cleaning positions, I think, added into the budget. But there needs to be some real thinking about how to do more than what was initially conceived of prior to COVID-19. So how is the district investing in support staff to ensure that our schools are healthy and safe, especially as we try to recover from a pandemic and prevent the spread of an infectious disease?
So I think there, and I recognize this lightning round, so I'll try to do this quickly. So there's the issue of what are the ongoing cleaning and maintenance supports and the positions we've added, which actually is basically, we started middle of last year, so it's over the last year and a half, to get up to a whole new design of how we approach cleaning in the schools and different shifts and different timing. The second piece of that is there's going to be an additional cost of what I'll refer to as a deep clean that's going to be required before we reopen post-COVID. So which is its own separate item we're trying to figure out how to budget for. We obviously don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but had some estimates. And so it's the issue of what's the deep clean to get us back to a baseline, and then how do we maintain that baseline? And I do think a lot of the changes have been put in, the recommendations for how we approach some of that, the new positions we've added, equipment we've added, all those types of issues are aimed at getting those two goals, resetting the baseline and then maintaining that baseline as we move forward.
Understood. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just also want to note that I would like us to follow up on the fact that the district had requested assistance from Comcast and its other internet providers, because right now they're being asked to pay $189 per student for MiFi hotspots, which just is not realistic. And this can just be a temporary kind of situation. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm going to remind my colleagues we're going to do 3 minutes on this lightning round for the purposes of getting around to all of them. And with that, I'm going to recognize our Majority Leader, Parker.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sanchez, and thank you for your leadership in chairing the Education Committee. Let me just start this round by noting for the record and for the benefit of the public that the reason why the city of Philadelphia is looking at a $650 million budget hole is because of revenues that we lost as a result of COVID-19. And we haven't had the ability to replace any of those lost revenues with any of the federal stimulus that has been sent in either of the packages. With this in mind, and I said this to Jerry Jordan at the PFT, I want to send a special thank you to every teacher. And in prep for these budget hearings, Madam Chair, I always talk with my teachers in schools in my districts and my district and principals, and I have had teachers who have said, listen, we understand that our salaries are connected to the city's budget, especially the revenue that the city is losing relative to wage taxes because of those out of county residents. And many of them have said, we will not, Madam Chair, decide to claim those dollars because we haven't been working in schools, in the city because we live outside the city. And I think teachers making that decision without being told they have to make that decision is something that should be recognized. In addition to that, I want to say to Joyce Wilkerson that I appreciate you noting the regional approach that the district is going to take relative to the special education funding and the charter funding and making that fix. That regional advocacy is important. I also want to ask that relative to this digital divide, and all of council will remain focused on this because this is not the district's responsibility to connect young people in neighborhoods and or families. That is something that it is a much bigger discussion. Technology is governed at the federal level, the state level, and then local regs that we have around towers and where. And so if we can find a way to connect with rural counties, because they are having the same challenge relative to connectivity in this environment, and that would make for a very good alliance. The last thing I want to get on the record is in regards to school buses. If we do, Madam Chair, see ourselves going back to school and we practice social distancing and don't have another wave or spike that prevents us from getting together, what will be the process on school buses? That is something that a lot of parents have said, well, my kid, Sherelle, gets on the school bus. How are they, if the school bus is filled with children sitting next to each other, how will that transportation work? So that is something that I would ask you to put on the record. And Dr. Height, if you have any response to the advocacy and or Joyce relative to the connectivity, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to allow Dr. Height to briefly talk about that, and I appreciate both Councilmember Gim and your highlighting this digital divide. It will be front and center. Dr. Height?
Yes, thank you. And we have actually, to the point that was made by Councilwoman Parker, we've actually we signed a letter that was signed by 60 other urban districts and cities across the country asking for more federal funds to come back to cities that are actually supporting what cities have lost in terms of revenue, because we know many of the urban districts are funded that way. In addition, we actually are advocating for, at the federal level, for E-rate funds to be used for this connectivity issue. We're also partnering with other urban districts because they're having the same challenges with connectivity that we are having here. With respect to the school buses, we have that challenge, and the other challenge is that 70,000 of our high schoolers, charter, district, parochial, Catholic, ride on SEPTA. And so SEPTA is also a part of the conversations that we are having and part of the work group that are pulled together to talk about how do we return to school.
Thank you. So next in line, I have Councilmember Gautier, and then I want to line up Councilman Green. Please, to the best of your ability, if we do lightning round, like I said, every single question will be answered and put on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over the past few years, the district has produced some positive outcomes with reducing truancy rates. How are you considering engaging these young people in a remote learning environment?
Yeah, so multiple ways. And so the number one, we're engaging them through participation, and we're just trying to connect with them right now. And so we want to connect with the young people. We want to get them into the behaviors of connecting with their teachers, with other school staff, with counselors. And then it is part of the training that many of the teachers actually participated in on a volunteer basis, was to talk about how to engage children utilizing technology, which is not children sitting in front of the technology listening to a lecture, but instead children actually using the technology to access information in the context of solving a problem or thinking critically or working with other students both at their school and across the city. So they're just unique ways of thinking differently about how we can do many of the activities that have been done in classrooms with individuals. Lots of apps out there. I had a student advisory meeting yesterday, and we had some 70 students from across the city, and they were all engaged in the activities that we did for about an hour yesterday during my superintendent student advisory. So it's just another example of how we can engage young people utilizing the technology, understanding that it's not a sufficient replacement for the teacher-student interaction that occurs on a daily basis, so we will also need that as well.
Thank you. The third district includes the wonderful workshop school. So I wanted to ask what work is being done in FY21 to expand the workshop school's model for project-based learning, secondary education opportunities, and entrepreneurship skills? And specifically, what conversations have you had with CCP on this topic as they are beginning the process of expanding their West Philadelphia campus?
Yeah, so we've actually have been talking about workshop school expanding over the next several years. And so you will see more students having the opportunity to actually be in programs like that. We've also started some other schools, Building 21, Box, Big Picture. There are other types of schools that have a similar approach and a similar model as the workshop school. Also, our partnership with CCP is great. We're actually expanded the opportunities for dual enrollment opportunities for our young people. So we've increased that significantly, and that is even before the scholarships that the mayor was talking about. And so we have a great partnership with CCP and look to expand those opportunities for our young people as well.
Thank you so much. That's all for me.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilmember Green and asks Councilmember Brooks to get ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez. Thank you, Dr. Height. I have a number of additional questions. As you know, I have a child who's on the autism spectrum and has some concerns regarding the access of education for those that have physical learning differences, as well as Finance Chair, I have a number of other concerns regarding the fiscal health of the school district. But I'll ask or submit those questions to Hania and Evelyn, who've done great work for the school district. But I just have a broader question. We've got a lot of points here about operations and the financial issues for the school district. But Dr. Height, what is your vision for the school district? As we've been going through this COVID-19 scenario, there was an article from McKinsey that talked about COVID-19 from a 5-stage perspective: resolve, resilience, reimagination, and reform. And we'll spend a lot of time on the resolve, resilience, and the return, trying to get back to where we were, but we need to really spend time on the reimagination and reform. And so from the perspective of reimagination and reform, what is your vision for the school district? My mother and others would often say, we don't ask, you don't get. So what is your vision for your school district going forward?
Yeah, thank you. And so we still have some of the same goals that we've had, Councilman Green, but I think as you and I talked earlier this week, one of the things that I think is big with the McKinsey report, and I've had the opportunity to review that as well, the reimagination and the opportunity to reimagine given the set of circumstances that we're navigating through right now. And so an example of that could be if I'm a student and I live in a community and I take AP statistics, or I want to take AP statistics, but there are not 8 or 9 other students at the school that are also in AP statistics, and so therefore it's not offered at my school. Now, in reimagining, that young person now can enroll in an AP statistics class somewhere else that is offered anywhere in the city of Philadelphia. And so it's those types of opportunities that it's those types of things that we can reimagine how those things are done and taking advantage of the technologies. And it will allow us to think differently about staffing patterns, about supports for young people, particularly the most vulnerable. But that is part of how we can reimagine learning and the access to learning. And so it's not a great science teacher only in one place. Now more children could have access to that great science teacher. Naturally, this is going to require a lot of things to happen, including talking with our labor partners through these types of examples. But it is an opportunity to reimagine how we can use technology to fundamentally change our approach to an education system that, quite frankly, hasn't changed over the last 200 years.
You're on mute. But thank you, Council Member Green, and for highlighting that. I know that with the COVID and the financial situation, we keep moving away from the importance of the academics and the long-term vision of the district. Council Member Brooks, and then I'm going to ask Council Member Catherine Gilmore Richardson to be on standby.
All right, thank you so much. My questions are responding to COVID-19. I want to acknowledge the amazing work that teachers have been doing in response to the pandemic. And I want to shout out all my teachers and my school staff, including the ones in my family. I have questions about how we're leveraging the outstanding work that our teachers have been doing, and also how are we making sure to meet the needs of all students and families during the remote learning. And I have a 3-part questions, and then you can respond. First, teachers all over the districts have developed and implemented innovative strategies to continue to engage students in the midst of this public health emergency. How are you leveraging the talent exhibited during this crisis and share these best practices district-wide? And second, as you know, online learning isn't the most ideal learning environment for many students, but especially for children with special needs and English language learners. Could you discuss how the district was continuing to educate and provide legally mandated services for both of these students' populations? And how are you ensuring that contractors are providing the full breadth of services to students that they're being paid for? And finally, will the district continue to its current practices of Zoom access to board meetings and the superintendent's weekly Facebook live stream after the current level of remote learning has ended? It's been a really good thing, and parents have been very responsive to it. And lastly, the communication with families. No, go ahead. I'm going to leave it there and give you the opportunity to answer those questions.
Thank you. I tried to catch as many of them as I possibly could. And so I'll start with the one, first of all, with the teachers. And you are right, Councilwoman, the teachers have been extraordinary through this process. And so the part of the digital environment that was created was also informed by teachers. Every day we're collecting information and then sharing that information back out. Many of the teachers are also sharing that information across their individual networks as well. But we have now the ability, because everybody is digital, we have the ability to collect and then share that information back out to all of them. We're also utilizing teachers on many of the teams who are developing content, who are developing activities to talk about best practices. And so we're collecting those on a regular basis. So thank you for that question. With respect to the vulnerable populations, we're trying to, as I talked about earlier, differentiate the staff who are making themselves available for those populations. In addition, the summer programming will be for the most vulnerable. And so the programming that we are doing in the summer really designed for the most vulnerable communities and the most vulnerable children. I only got to two of your questions. We'll get the other responses to you as a part of the responses to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Height.
Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. And again, we'll make sure that all of the questions get answered. I'm going to recognize Councilmember Catherine Gilmer Richardson and then ask Councilman Jones to line up. After that, I have Councilmembers Bass and then Squilla, and then we'll need to close out. As you know, we have a hard 12:30. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam Chair and Chair of our Education Committee. Truly appreciate all of your leadership in this effort. I wanted to go back to Ori at the close of my last line of questioning. I wanted to ask about the cleaners. You had mentioned something in your remarks relative to, looking at the staffing needs of the district moving forward based on the budget. And I wanted to just put on the record that we need to ensure that we have a plan for sanitizing our schools on a daily basis, to really prevent the transmission of COVID-19. So I wanted to talk about what the plan is around our essential maintenance workers in the district and how we are planning to sanitize the schools moving forward. And then my next question was around your capital budget projections for roof replacements. Can you speak to if the district has a plan around solar readiness for existing roofing repairs to try to have a dual impact on saving money and energy bills while making the infrastructure more sustainable?
Thank you for the questions. On the first one, we're actually working both with obviously ever-changing protocols and recommendations from health and safety on cleaning. We're working with 32BJ to help design and create a cleaning plan, and one to be implementable, and then we want to design our staffing around that. So we're trying to follow that step, but it's a planning process we're going through right now. And again, as we get additional protocols and additional advice from federal, state, local health recommendations, those are all things we're going to take into consideration and work with our labor partners to develop a plan that meets those standards and is sustainable and properly staffed. So we're trying to follow that order for design. In terms of the capital budget, so we, in addition to the $500 million, we actually have ongoing energy projects going on, which are identified GIZA projects, where phase one is actually supposed to be finished this summer. And we did a separate green bond borrowing for that. So we are always looking at ways to be more energy efficient where we can. Some of our buildings and their roofs are complicated because of the age of the building. And the way they're shaped or structured, which has all kinds of other problems, but we do look at ways we can be more efficient. We've done projects with, air conditioning, improving air quality. We've done work with replacing windows, replacing lighting has been a big one. I know we did a few demonstration projects last year. So we do look at those opportunities where we can be more energy efficient and in a way that also supports what's happening in the building, improves climate issues in the building as well.
And quickly, I just wanted to get this in. Do you rank all of the building rooftops from worst to best and try to figure out which ones need the most repair? And if you could just provide a list of the rooftops that you plan on repairing in the upcoming fiscal year, that would be helpful. And lastly, I just wanted to highlight a TikTok video that I saw from the culinary arts students and a teacher at Dobbins. It was a phenomenal online learning opportunity for the young people to share some of the meals that they created in their own home environments while still utilizing the techniques they're learning in their culinary arts program. So I wanted to highlight that video. I truly enjoyed watching it. So special shout out to all the Dobbins students and teachers and all the CTE students. We'll be thinking about your educational plan as we move forward as it relates to hands-on learning. So thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And again, we'll make sure those questions get answered. I have Councilmember Jones and then Councilwoman Bass. And again, we have a hard 12:30. Ori, I need you to do lightning round.
So thank you, Madam Chair, for your work in education and being my tutor back in the day when I first came on the issue. So I want to shout out Dr. Height, who has inadvertently got a lot of Philly in him. When State Representative Saylor attacked his position on giving out Chromebooks to our students, he stood up for those students and did not take that disrespect lightly. He did it in a gentlemanly manner, but he did stand up for them. And I am, for one, truly thankful for that. Secondly, I want to thank Evelyn Oates for the insight that she's given the West Philadelphia elected officials in my district about the reconstruction of new schools such as Cassidy and how that is going to be planned not for the present, but for students of the future. And if you could you guys talk about how you're going to do community engagement on new construction and design thoughts about how to build that George Jetson new school environment?
Thank you, Councilman Jones, and thank you for the shout out earlier. And I will say that with all of the new schools that are being constructed, there will be opportunities for charrettes that are community-based once we get into the design phase, and so that individuals within the community will have an opportunity. We have multiple new schools happening. One is the Ryan Avenue School, one is Cassidy, and another one is Pierce. And so there will be, during the design phase, opportunities for the communities to engage in those processes to design those facilities.
You're on mute.
I was giving up my available time to my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Council Member. And again, we any other questions colleagues have? I want to recognize Council Member Bass. And again, we are almost on a hard stop at 12:30. Thanks, everyone, again. Council Member Bass. Councilmember Bass. Okay. Councilmember Squilla said he would submit his questions in writing. I know that Councilmember Gim had asked for another opportunity, so I'm going to give her a minute to put her questions on the record so that we can allow for Dr. Height to make some closing remarks. Okay, since I cannot get the folks on, Councilwoman Bass, please proceed.
Good afternoon. Sorry about the technical difficulties here. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your hard work on this issue. And I just have a couple of very quick questions. Dr. Height, there was a recent article in the New York Times that said our students were receiving 1 hour of instruction per day. Can you comment on that?
Yes, we have all students should be engaged in instruction, at least not engaged, but I'm talking about asynchronous and synchronous instruction. And so it's 3 hours a day that teachers are making themselves available for children. And while some of the instruction could be direct, other things could be activities that students are doing when they're not in front of a teacher.
Councilwoman Bass, you're on mute.
Thank you. Dr. Height, you may have to, I'll just submit my questions in writing if you just want to follow up, but I did have one thing that I wanted to follow up on really quickly, and that is that, as my understanding is that students will receive about $300. Each Philadelphia School District public school student will receive about $300 in SNAP benefits because of the circumvention of the school district. And so the question is, how rational? We know that there's a pretty hefty number of students that the district has sort of been unable to reach and not been able to be in contact with. So can you tell us how will we reach those students to let them know, to make sure that those very important SNAP benefits are going to them and their families directly?
Yes, really important question. Thank you for that. And we are actually reaching out to all of the families, and if in fact numbers have changed and addresses have changed, we're also working with partners with the Office of Children and Families, with DHS, to also locate or to help locate those families as well. So we're using all means that are available to us, mailings, robocalls, in some cases, home visits, to figure out what has happened, so that we're ensuring that as many of their families who qualify for that EBT card, they will have the opportunity to receive that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hyder or Joyce Wilkerson, I don't know if you have a minute that you want to do some closing response for us as we do this. I want to remind folks that this afternoon at 3 o'clock we will have public hearings, and just ask also for the record, a couple of questions. I think it's real important, and I think Wilkerson said this earlier, around the issue of us really pivoting to academic achievements. And I know the district has done some work on realigning some of their regions and academic support. So I'm going to encourage you to submit that for the record to all of our council members, including some of the work around the behavioral health supports. The district has responded with our hotline, and we appreciate all of that. But the fact is that after a lot of hard work, one of the areas where the city administration, community behavioral health, and our Department of Behavioral Health have really changed in the way that we partner with the district is on the new behavioral health supports. So I don't know if you want to touch on that quickly as part of your closing remarks, but I want to allow you a minute. And Joyce Wilkerson, we're on a 12:30 hard block, hard cut, and we will be recessed till 3 o'clock. Dr. Height?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson. And so one of the things that I think is really important is that we want to thank City Council for the ongoing support and the support that we've received from this council over the past several years. And so thank you for making and helping us make the investments in schools. I will also add that we're starting this Thursday an advocacy effort in Harrisburg, so that we are not asking for additional monies, but we're asking them to maintain the current funding levels so that our cuts are not more significant than they have to be. And then we're also asking them to pass all federal dollars to school districts across the Commonwealth. And so those are the two advocacy points. We're asking individuals to join us, because that will then bring down that significant deficit that was described earlier. I just want to end with just thanking the council for your efforts, for your questions. We'll get the responses to you, and for your support.
Dr. Joyce Wilkerson?
I want to thank you and the rest of the committee for the partnership. I think having the council committee following the education issues as closely as you are, embracing the pivot to student achievement, means a great deal to us, and look forward to working closely as we try to figure out what September looks like for our kids, and staying on top of the funding challenges that we have. We're lobbying aggressively at the federal and state levels. We're not, we'll be back to you with our needs from the city. And so really appreciate the close partnership that we forged. So thank you.
Thank you. And then with that, I want to recognize that this hearing has come to a close and we stand in recess until 3 o'clock. Thank you everyone for your participation.
+12158734784 is now exiting.